My daughter-in-law kicked me out of my house after winning the $95 million lottery. It was a Thursday morning when I heard the news that would turn my world upside down. My daughter-in-law, Lydia, had won the lottery, $95 million. My son, David, was still at work when she called me. Her voice trembled with excitement. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "our lives will never be the same." I felt my heart swell with joy. Lydia had always been ambitious, and I knew she dreamed of a better life. I smiled through the phone, tears in my eyes. "Congratulations, my dear. God has truly blessed you both." I hung up and prayed. I prayed for gratitude, for guidance, for their future. I imagined them buying a new home, traveling, starting a foundation, or doing something good for others. I even thought selfishly that maybe life would finally get a little easier for me too. For years I had shared that house with them. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest 3-bedroom home I bought with my late husband before he passed away. We built everything there with our bare hands. Every corner carried a memory, the smell of his old leather chair, the creak of the stairs he fixed himself, the flowers he planted out back. When Lydia and David moved in, it felt like family again. I cooked for them, watched their children, and did what mothers do, give without keeping count. But 3 days after the big win, everything changed. They came home in a new car, shining red, the kind of car you don't park near other people for fear of scratches. Lydia stepped out first. She wore designer sunglasses and a new diamond bracelet. David followed behind, quieter, holding shopping bags. She didn't even say hello. She just handed me an envelope. "For you," she said, smiling. I opened it slowly. Inside was a check for $5,000. I looked at her, puzzled. "What is this for?" "To help you settle somewhere else," she said casually. The words didn't register at first. "Settle where else?" I asked. She crossed her arms, exhaled sharply, and said, "We're selling the house. It's ours now. We want to start fresh." I felt my stomach drop. "This house isn't yours to sell, Lydia. This is my home. I built this with my husband." She tilted her head. "You gave it to David after he got married, didn't you?" I shook my head. "No. I let you both live here. I never signed it over." David avoided my eyes. He looked down, fidgeting with his car keys. That silence told me everything. Lydia smirked and said, "Well, you can talk to your son about that. The paperwork's already done." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at David, waiting for him to speak, to stop her, to tell me it was a misunderstanding. But he didn't. He muttered something about new beginnings and walked inside. My hands trembled. "David," I said softly, "this is your father's home. His ashes are in that garden. How can you let this happen?" He turned his face away and said, "Lydia and I talked about it. We need space. We'll buy you something smaller. It's for the best." For the best. Those 3 words cut deeper than any knife. I stood there as they unpacked more shopping bags, laughing, sipping champagne. It was as if 30 years of love and sacrifice had been erased overnight, replaced by greed dressed in designer clothes. That night, I sat on the porch until the lights went out. I thought maybe they'd call me back inside. Maybe my son would come out, sit beside me, and say he was sorry. But instead, I watched as he closed the curtains, shutting me out completely. I didn't have the strength to argue anymore. I got into my old car, the same one my husband had once fixed with duct tape and prayer, and I drove down the road. I parked near a quiet corner and tried to sleep. The seat was stiff. The air was cold. But the real chill came from what had just happened, from realizing the people you love most can make you feel like a stranger in your own home. As I stared at the ceiling of that car, I whispered a question to the darkness. Where did I go wrong? I had no answer, only silence. By morning, the sun rose over the same roof I once called mine. Through the windshield, I saw movers pulling up to the house. Lydia was already outside, pointing where she wanted the new furniture to go. My son stood beside her, holding a clipboard, obedient and hollow. It hit me then. They weren't the same people anymore. The money had taken them both. I drove away, tears blurring the road. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. That night, I slept in the car again, while my son closed the curtains. That night, I slept in the car, while my son closed the curtains. If your child allowed this to happen, would you ever forgive them? The next morning, I sat in my car with the engine off, my body heavy, my heart hollow. The air was still, but inside me everything was spinning. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I watched the street where I'd lived most of my life and realized it no longer belonged to me. Neighbors passed by, people I'd shared gardens, birthdays, and church rides with. Some slowed down when they saw me. Others kept walking, pretending not to notice. No one wanted to be caught between sympathy and gossip. I saw it in their eyes, the curiosity, the discomfort, the judgment. She must have done something, they probably whispered. People always try to explain cruelty by blaming the victim. From where I sat, I could see my front gate open. Movers were already inside. They carried out my furniture piece by piece, my dining table, my late husband's bookshelf, the armchair where I used to rock my grandson to sleep. All of it leaving through the same door I had opened to them when they needed a place to live. Lydia stood in the driveway, pointing at things, her hands on her hips, her voice loud and sharp. She directed everyone with the authority of someone who thought she owned the world now. And maybe she did. Or at least she believed so. David stood beside her, face blank, staring at the ground. He held his phone the entire time, never looking up at me, never looking at the life they were dismantling. Every sound, the scrape of furniture, the clatter of boxes, the laughter of movers, felt like a hammer striking my chest. I gripped the steering wheel, watching my memories being loaded into a truck. I finally forced myself out of the car and walked up to him. "David," I called softly. He flinched, but didn't look up. "This is your father's home. You grew up here. Every corner of this place carries our story." He sighed, long and tired, like he was the one being wronged. "Mum, Lydia says it's time to move on. We'll get you a place. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at him, trying to recognize the boy I had raised, the boy who once ran barefoot in that garden, the one who used to bring me flowers from the yard every Mother's Day. But that boy was gone. What stood before me was a man ruled by someone else's will and his own greed. "Move on," I repeated quietly. "To where, David? I'm 61. I don't have savings left. I put everything into this house, into you. I gave you everything." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He mumbled, "You'll figure something out." Then he turned and walked away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and make him see what he'd done. But instead, I stood still. My voice failed me. My heart was too broken for anger. As the sun dipped low, I watched them laugh as if nothing was wrong. Lydia leaned on his shoulder, scrolling through her phone, maybe searching for her next luxury. My son smiled weakly, playing along. That evening, I drove to my friend Ruth's small apartment across town. She didn't ask many questions. She could see the story in my eyes. Her place was small, barely enough for one, but she made space for me. I brought only one suitcase and a single-framed photograph of my husband. I placed it on the bedside table that night and whispered, "I failed, didn't I?" The next morning, I returned to the old neighborhood. The for sale sign was already gone. I stopped the car across the street and stared at the house, my house, one last time. The curtains were new, the color different, but I could still see the outline of the furniture I'd chosen with care. It looked like someone else's life now. I drove away before anyone saw me. For days, I stayed quiet. Ruth tried to cheer me up with stories and tea, but the silence inside me was louder. I spent the nights thinking about how quickly love could turn into possession. I had raised my son to be kind, to be loyal, to honor family. Yet, when greed came knocking, everything I taught him dissolved. 3 days later, I passed by the house again. It was empty. A new car sat in the driveway, but the old furniture was gone. A real estate agent's lock hung on the door. It was official. My home was sold. My name erased from the only place I had ever truly belonged. And with it, my son's conscience disappeared too. I didn't cry that day. The tears had dried up. All I felt was a quiet determination rising inside me, a feeling I hadn't known in years. They might have taken my house, but they would not take my dignity. I didn't know what I would do yet, or where I would go, but I knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Because when a mother loses everything, she stops being afraid of anything. 3 days later, the house was gone, and so was my son's conscience. Would you fight for your home, or walk away with your dignity? The days turned into weeks, and the silence grew heavier. I woke up every morning in that cramped apartment, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine. My friend Grace tried to comfort me. "You'll get through this," she said. I smiled weakly, but inside I felt hollow. Everywhere I went, people whispered. Some pitied me. Others blamed me. "She should have kept quiet," I heard one woman say at the market. "At least they gave her something." I bit my tongue. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that $5,000 couldn't replace 30 years of memories. One afternoon, as I was cleaning an office, I looked up at the TV. My breath caught. There they were, Lydia and David, sitting side by side at a charity gala. The cameras flashed as they smiled for the world. Lydia wore diamonds that could have paid my rent for 10 years. David looked older, polished, distant. The interviewer smiled. "So how does it feel to be millionaires?" Lydia laughed. "It feels earned," she said. "We've worked hard for everything we have." My hands froze on the mop handle. Worked hard? The house they sold had been built from my late husband's sweat and my sacrifices. David had been raised under that roof, fed, clothed, and sent to school by my hands. And now they stood there, pretending they had done it all alone. The interviewer asked, "What about family? Who helped you through tough times?" Lydia smiled, her voice light. "We did it all ourselves." Her laugh cut through me like a blade. I turned off the TV, but the sound stayed in my head. For days I couldn't sleep. I wasn't angry anymore. I was heartbroken. It felt like watching your own child throw away his soul for applause. I tried to move on. I took on more cleaning jobs. I saved every naira, every coin. I told myself I didn't need them. But every time I passed a newspaper stand, I saw their faces. "The new power couple," one headline said. Another called them an inspiration to young families. The world believed their lie, and I stayed quiet. One morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," a trembling voice spoke. "Is this Mrs. Adalek?" "Yes," I said carefully. "This is from City Hospital. Your son David has been admitted. We need you to come immediately." My heart stopped. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Greed has a way of collapsing, and it started with that one phone call. When I walked into that hospital room, I saw what money had done to my family. It was 2 a.m. when my phone rang. The sound jolted me awake. For a few seconds, I lay still, staring at the ceiling of the small room I now called home. My heart began to race. No one calls at that hour, unless something is terribly wrong. The phone buzzed again. I reached for it with trembling hands. The name on the screen froze me. David. My son. The son I hadn't heard from since the day he turned his back on me for money. I answered quietly. "David." His voice cracked. "Mum, please, Lydia's been arrested." For a moment, I thought I misheard. Arrested? For what? She's in trouble. It's bad. Please come to the station." Then the line went dead. I sat there in silence, the phone still pressed to my ear. The small room was dark, except for the faint light from the street lamp outside. My breath felt heavy. Lydia, the woman who threw me out of my home, was now behind bars. I stood up slowly, dressed, and grabbed my old coat. The night air bit at my face as I stepped outside. The streets were quiet, empty, except for the distant hum of a passing motorcycle. I flagged down a taxi. The driver glanced at me through the mirror. "Late night, Mum." I nodded. "My family needs me." He said nothing more. As we drove, I looked out the window at the empty roads. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, grey hair tucked beneath a scarf. I had grown old fast in the months since Lydia forced me out. When we reached the police station, David was standing outside. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. He looked like a boy again, lost, scared, and searching for someone to fix what he'd broken. He rushed toward me. "Mum, thank God you came." "What happened?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Lydia invested most of the money in some private development project, something about offshore real estate and luxury condos. It was supposed to double our wealth, but the company doesn't exist. It's all a scam." I felt a wave of disbelief. She didn't get advice? Didn't check? She wouldn't listen? She said the lawyers were slowing her down. We walked into the station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A police officer recognized David and nodded toward an interrogation room. Through the glass, I saw Lydia sitting on a metal chair. Her hair was tangled, her face pale. She wasn't wearing her diamond earrings or her designer jacket. She looked ordinary. When her eyes met mine, she frowned. "You came to watch me fall, didn't you?" Her words were sharp, but her voice was weaker than. I remembered. I kept my tone calm. "I came because my son called me." She leaned forward. "You must be happy. You've been waiting for this." I looked at her, really looked. There was no satisfaction in what I saw, only pity. "No, Lydia, I don't take joy in anyone's downfall. But maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything." Her lips tightened. She looked away. I turned to David. "You need a lawyer. Don't say anything until one arrives." He nodded, voice low. "They said she could face charges for fraud and conspiracy. She signed everything herself. I didn't even know half of what she was doing." I could hear the shame in his voice. "David," I said quietly, "when you walked me out of my house, you thought money made you powerful, but money without wisdom destroys faster than poverty ever will." He lowered his head. "Mum, I'm sorry." I didn't respond. The words meant nothing yet. An officer came out of the room holding a folder. He spoke to David directly. "Your wife admitted she transferred over $50 million into an unverified offshore account. The investors filed a case this morning. We'll keep her here until the hearing." David nodded weakly. The officer glanced at me. "You're her mother?" I hesitated. "No, I'm the mother of the man who forgot his." He blinked, unsure what to say, then walked away. When I looked back through the glass, Lydia was staring at the wall. The confidence, the arrogance, the laughter, all gone. She was no longer the woman from television interviews calling herself a self-made millionaire. She was someone else now, small, cornered, and afraid. I watched her for a long time. I remembered the night she gave me the envelope, $5,000 to help me start somewhere else. I remembered the way she smiled when the movers took my husband's chair. I remembered David's silence. Now it was their turn to taste silence. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "What do I do, Mom?" "You do what's right," I said. "Face it. Don't hide behind excuses." He nodded. "I should have listened to you." I sighed. Regret doesn't rebuild trust. It only reminds us of what we destroyed. We sat together for the first time in months, not as enemies, but as two people connected by loss. I left before dawn. Outside, the air was cool, almost peaceful. I stood by the road and watched the horizon lighten. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange calm. Not happiness, not revenge, but closure slowly forming at the edges of my heart. By morning, the story had broken online. Headlines screamed across every platform. Lottery couple loses half their fortune in investment scam. From millionaires to lawsuits, the fall of David and Lydia Parker, neighbors whispered. Old friends sent me screenshots. Reporters camped near their mansion gates. Their faces, the same faces that once smiled. From magazine covers, now filled gossip sites under words like greed, fraud, and arrest. I sat by my window, sipping tea, reading each headline. I didn't smile. There was no joy in watching someone's world burn, even if they once burned yours. But I did feel something else, a quiet sense of balance. Life had corrected itself. The same arrogance that once cast me aside had finally turned inward. By evening, David called again. "Mom," he said softly, "Lydia's been released on bail. She's blaming me. She says I made her invest." I stayed silent. He continued, "Reporters are everywhere. People are calling us thieves. I don't know where to go." "You'll figure it out," I replied. "You're adults. You made choices." "Can I come see you?" he asked. I paused. My heart ached to say yes, but my mind reminded me of the cold nights, the humiliation, the tears I shed in silence. "Not tonight, David. Some distances need time to heal." There was a long pause on the line. Then he whispered, "I understand." After the call, I placed the phone down and stared at the ceiling again, the same way I had hours earlier. Only this time I didn't feel powerless. I felt like someone who had survived the storm. The truth was simple. You can rebuild a house, but not trust. You can win millions, but lose your soul. Lydia thought she had secured a future. Instead, she built a trap around herself. That night, I prayed for strength, not for them, but for myself. I prayed for peace that doesn't depend on revenge, and for wisdom that comes only after being broken. Before I went to sleep, I whispered to the quiet room, "Sometimes God doesn't punish. He lets people live long enough to face the lessons they ignored, and somewhere in that truth I found rest." The next day the story broke online, and their empire began to crumble. Would you step in to help, or let them face the consequences of their choices? The story spread like wildfire. Every major outlet ran it for days. Lottery couple loses millions in investment scam. From fortune to failure, the Parkers' $1 million mistake. Their faces were everywhere, not smiling this time, but frozen in photographs that screamed embarrassment. I didn't look for the coverage. It found me. People in the neighborhood whispered when I passed. At the grocery store, 2 women stood by the magazine stand, shaking their heads. Can you imagine? 95 million gone, just like that. I walked past quietly, pretending not to hear, but inside I felt something unfamiliar, a strange balance between sadness and justice. I had lost my home, my comfort, my trust in my own blood. Now they were losing everything money could buy. Karma, I thought, has its own calendar. Their mansion was the first casualty. It stood tall at the end of a gated street, marble floors, imported chandeliers, an indoor pool. They had boasted about it on television. Now, a large red seized notice hung on the front gate. The government had frozen their accounts for unpaid taxes and pending fraud investigations. I remember driving past one morning. The lawn was overgrown, the once polished cars gone. The house looked lifeless, as if even the walls were ashamed to have been part of the show. A few days later, my phone rang again. It was David. He didn't sound angry this time, only tired. "Mom, can I come see you?" I hesitated. My mind replayed everything, the day he turned away, the way he let Lydia hand me that envelope like I was a stranger. But something in his voice pulled at the part of me that still remembered the little boy who used to run to me after school. "Come," I said quietly. That evening, he arrived at my small apartment. The moment I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner, worn out, as if life had drained every ounce of pride from him. His once pressed shirts were wrinkled. His shoulders, once squared with confidence, now drooped under invisible weight. He stepped inside slowly, glancing around my modest space, a small table, 2 chairs, 1 couch, and framed pictures of better times. I watched him take it all in. "You live here now?" he asked softly. "Yes," I replied. "This is home." He nodded, staring at the floor. "It's smaller than I remember." I looked at him carefully. Small, yes, but peaceful. He sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands trembling. "I don't know what to do anymore. The sponsors pulled out. Lydia's being sued. The accounts are frozen. The lawyers want money we don't have." His words came out in bursts. A man drowning, gasping between confessions. "I thought we were building something great," he said. "We were planning investments, businesses, partnerships. She kept saying we were unstoppable." I leaned back, folding my hands. "And you believed her?" He nodded slowly. "I wanted to. She made everything sound possible." There was silence, the kind that stretches, heavy and full of things unsaid. Then he looked up, eyes wet. "Mum, I'm sorry. For everything. For what I let happen to you. For not standing up when she pushed you out. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I destroyed my family instead." I studied his face. The regret was real. But regret doesn't erase choices. It only exposes them. "David," I said softly, "you can lose money and rebuild. But once you trade your soul for comfort, it takes years to find it again." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I understand now. I thought love meant loyalty to Lydia, no matter what. But I forgot that loyalty to the wrong person is still betrayal." That sentence stayed with me. For the first time in months, I saw the boy I raised, humble, broken, but finally honest. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a small silver ring. It was his father's wedding band. I kept it. "All these years," he said. "After Dad passed, you told me to wear it when I found someone who respected me the way you respected him. I failed that promise." I looked at the ring. Time had dulled its shine, but not its meaning. "Maybe it's not about failure," I said. "Maybe it's about learning what love isn't." We sat in silence for a while. I poured him tea. He drank slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "They took the house." "I know. They said the taxes weren't paid. Lydia said she handled it, but she didn't." He shook his head. "I'm homeless now, the same way I made you." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "Now you understand how it feels to lose everything." He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. "Yes, Mom, I do." Tears rolled down his cheeks, and I let him cry. There was nothing left to say. His apology didn't rebuild my past, but it gave me something I hadn't expected, peace. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You can't undo what's done, but you can decide what kind of man you'll be from here on." He looked up. "Do you forgive me?" I thought about it for a moment. "Forgiveness isn't a gift, David. It's a process. You'll have to walk through it, one honest step at a time." He nodded slowly. "I will." He stayed that night on the couch. When I woke up early the next morning, I saw him asleep, curled up under the thin blanket. For the first time, He looked peaceful, not rich, not proud, just human. I made breakfast quietly. The smell of coffee filled the small kitchen. As I watched him wake, I remembered when he was a child, how he used to stumble sleepily into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, asking for pancakes. For a brief second, the years of pain disappeared. But memories can only comfort. They can't change history. When he left later that day, I stood at the door and said, "Take care of yourself. Don't let guilt bury you. Let it teach you." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Thank you, Mom." After he left, the apartment felt still again. I sat by the window, holding the old ring he'd left behind. I didn't know what his future held, but I knew he had taken his first step toward redemption. The news continued to roll. Each day brought a new headline, another detail of Lydia's downfall. She had tried to hide the money in offshore accounts, but investigators found everything. The lavish cars, the jewelry, even her designer dresses were listed as assets to be seized. Public opinion turned fast. The same people who once praised her now ridiculed her arrogance. Social media was ruthless. Memes, jokes, mockery. Lydia's image crumbled faster than her fortune. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could finally close that chapter of my life. But peace rarely comes without one last test. It was late afternoon when I heard a knock at my door. I opened it and froze. Lydia stood there. Her hair was unkempt, her makeup gone. She looked nothing like the woman who once smiled for cameras and handed me a check to leave my own house. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She held a small handbag and nothing else. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. My first instinct was to close the door, but curiosity, or perhaps closure, stopped me. She stepped inside, glancing around the apartment. "So this is where you've been living?" "Yes," I said. She nodded slowly. "It's humble." I crossed my arms. "It's honest." She sat down without asking. "David won't talk to me. The lawyers dropped the case. The investors want everything back. I don't know where else to go." I stood there watching her. The same woman who once had everything, power, wealth, control, now sat in front of me asking for shelter. "Why come here?" I asked. She looked up. "Because you're the only one who ever cared about David, and because I know you're not cruel." Her words cut deep, not because they were flattering, but because they were true. I wasn't cruel. I was tired. Tired of pain, of lessons learned too late. I walked to the window and looked outside. The sun was setting, casting a faint orange glow across the street. "You destroyed my peace once," I said. "I won't let you do it again." She bit her lip. "Please, just for tonight." I turned to her, meeting her gaze. "Lydia, kindness isn't weakness, but forgiveness doesn't mean reopening old wounds. You need to face what you've done, not hide from it." She looked down, tears spilling over. "I don't know how." "You start by accepting that everything you built was on someone else's pain." There was silence. She stood up slowly, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she whispered, "I wish I had listened to you." I didn't respond. She stepped outside, closed the door softly behind her, and disappeared down the hallway. I stood there for a long time, the room filled with the faint echo of her footsteps. In that moment, I realized something. Justice doesn't always come through courts or headlines. Sometimes it comes quietly, when those who hurt you are finally forced to face themselves. That night, I slept without bitterness for the first time in months. But Lydia wasn't done. She still had one final move, and it would drag me back into the chaos. A week after Lydia left my apartment, I thought the storm had passed. I thought silence meant peace. I was wrong. It was a grey, quiet morning when I heard a knock. Sharp, hurried, almost frantic. I opened the door to find Lydia standing there again. Her once glamorous presence was gone. Her hair hung in uneven strands, and her clothes looked wrinkled and worn. Her eyes darted from side to side like a cornered animal. "Please," she whispered, "I need your help." For a moment, I simply stared at her. I remembered the envelope she once handed me, the one that said, "To help you settle somewhere else." I remembered sleeping in my car that night while she turned out the lights in the home I built. Now she stood before me, trembling. "My accounts are frozen," she said, voice cracking. "The bank won't release a thing. They're investigating everything. I have nowhere to go." I crossed my arms. "What about your friends from the gala? The ones who toasted to your new life?" She swallowed hard. "They stopped answering my calls. I don't even have money for food." I looked past her at the cold street. The same world she once flaunted her riches in now ignored her completely. Part of me wanted to close the door, to finally draw a line. But another part, the part that had raised a son and still believed in second chances, hesitated. I sighed and stepped aside. "You can stay for a few nights," I said. "No promises beyond that." Her relief was instant. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She brushed past me, clutching her small handbag like it held the last pieces of her dignity. I led her to the spare room, a small space with a single bed, plain curtains, and a wooden dresser. She sat down quietly. "It's been so long since I've felt safe," she said. Safe. The irony wasn't lost on me. That first night, she barely spoke. She showered, ate the soup I made, and went straight to bed. I lay awake for hours, thinking about what it meant to let her back in. Compassion can be a dangerous habit when it meets someone without remorse. The next morning, she was up early, pretending to clean. "You've made this place so cozy," she said. "It feels like home." I nodded but said nothing. I watched her closely. Something in her tone didn't sit right. It wasn't gratitude, it was calculation. By the second day, she began asking questions. "Do you get a pension? Do you own this apartment? Does David ever send you money?" Her curiosity was sharp and intentional. I answered carefully. "I manage," I said each time. That evening, she offered to cook. I let her. She hummed while chopping vegetables, acting like we were family again, but every time I looked at her, her smile faltered, forced, uneasy, as if she were rehearsing empathy rather than feeling it. On the third night, the truth surfaced. It was late. The lights were off except for a dim lamp in the hallway. I woke up to the sound of her voice, soft but urgent. I followed it quietly, stopping by the door of her room. She was on the phone. "No, listen," she whispered. "She's old. She still has some savings, maybe from her late husband. I'll get it, okay? Just a few thousand to keep us going until this blows over." My blood ran cold. There it was, the real reason she came back. Not for forgiveness, not for family, but for survival at my expense. I pushed the door open. "You'll get nothing from me." She froze. Her face, drained of color. What are you talking about?" she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Lydia. I heard everything." For a moment, she tried to hold her composure. Then her expression hardened. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "You've never had to fight to stay relevant." I laughed bitterly. "Relevant? You threw away decency for money. And when the money vanished, so did your worth, to yourself and everyone else." She glared at me. "You think you're better than me because you're poor but proud. You don't know what it's like to lose everything overnight." I stepped closer. "I do, Lydia, because you took everything from me." We stood there, face to face, two women connected by one man and divided by greed. "You should go to bed," I said finally. "Tomorrow, you'll leave." She didn't argue. She turned away, muttering something under her breath, and closed the door. I couldn't sleep that night. My hands trembled with anger, not just at her words, but at myself for allowing her back in. Kindness had once again been mistaken for weakness. At dawn, I made a decision. I called the police and explained everything: the fraud case, her unstable behavior, and my concern for safety. The officer advised that I could file a report if she refused to leave. When Lydia woke up, her eyes were red. "You called the police?" she asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "You need to go." She looked around the room. The bed she slept in, the plate she ate from, and for a brief second I saw something almost human in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. But then it disappeared. "You'll regret this," she said. "People will believe what I tell them." I said nothing. I opened the door and waited. She stepped outside slowly, clutching her bag. The hallway light flickered above her as she walked away. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled. It was over, or so I thought. That night, my phone buzzed non-stop. Dozens of notifications poured in, messages, comments, mentions. I opened one and my heart dropped. Lydia had posted a long message online. It began with, "I never thought the woman I once called Mom would steal from me." She accused me of taking her jewelry, her cash, even her late father's watch, a watch I had never seen in my life. The post went viral fast. People shared it, commented, speculated. Some said, "How could a mother-in-law do that?" Others wrote, "Sounds like she's bitter that Lydia got rich first." Within hours, my name, my full name, was being discussed by strangers. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the chaos, my hands trembling. My phone rang constantly, reporters, relatives, even neighbors asking questions. I felt my world closing in again. First, I had lost my home, then my son. Now, my dignity was under attack. I called David immediately, but he didn't answer. I left a message, my voice shaking. "David, tell your wife to stop." She's gone too far. No response. By midnight, I couldn't bear it anymore. I turned off the phone and sat in silence. The clock ticked loudly, each second a reminder that lies travel faster than truth. But I refused to cry. I had cried enough. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I showed them the post, explained the history, and presented the messages I had recorded from her last visit. The officer took notes carefully. "Ma'am," he said, "you did the right thing. We'll open a defamation report. Given her previous fraud case, this could strengthen the investigation against her." For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window. The sun filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. I realized something. Truth doesn't need to shout. It stands quietly, waiting for lies to destroy themselves. Days passed. Lydia's post began losing traction. People started questioning her story. One user commented, "Didn't she lose all her money in a scam? Now she's blaming her mother-in-law?" Another added, "Funny how everyone else is the villain except her." Slowly the tide turned. David finally called. His voice was low. "Mum, I saw the post. I told her to delete it." I closed my eyes. "And did she?" "Yes. She's leaving town. The investigators are after her again." I nodded quietly. "Let her go, David. You can't save someone who doesn't want redemption." He sighed. "I know." After the call, I looked around my small apartment, my safe, quiet corner of the world. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. Every cup, every curtain, every chair was earned with honesty, not stolen or bought with deceit. That night I prayed, not for revenge, not even for Lydia's punishment, but for peace, for myself, for David, even for her. Because sometimes the harshest justice isn't imprisonment or humiliation. It's being left alone with your own reflection, forced to face the wreckage you caused. That night, she posted a message online, accusing me of theft. I thought I had seen the worst of Lydia's cruelty. I thought her lies would fade like the rest of her noise. But when her post went viral, I learned how fast the world can turn against an old woman with no power and no platform. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages poured in, hundreds of them. Some from strangers, some from people I had known all my life. Did you really steal from her? Why would you do that to your son's wife? Shame on you. I didn't even know how they got my number. Someone had posted my picture, an old photo from a family event years ago, one where Lydia and I had been smiling. Now it was being used in memes and headlines. Elderly woman steals from lottery couple, family torn apart. They took my face and turned it into a symbol of greed. At first, I tried to ignore it. I stayed off my phone, unplugged the television, and told myself that the noise would die down. But it didn't. It grew. Neighbors whispered when I walked past. The woman from the grocery store who used to greet me warmly now avoided my eyes. Even the pastor from the small church nearby asked me to clear the air, as though forgiveness required me to prove my innocence. I was being tried in the court of public opinion, a place where evidence doesn't matter, only emotion and outrage. 2 nights after the post went up, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was met by flashing cameras. Reporters. They stood on my doorstep shouting questions. "Mom, did you take your daughter-in-law's jewelry? Are you aware she claims you've been jealous since her lottery win? Would you like to give your side of the story?" I slammed the door. My hands shook. My heart raced. They didn't care about truth. They wanted drama. I sat in the dark afterward, staring at the wall. My small apartment, once my refuge, now felt like a cell. Every vibration from my phone felt like a new attack. Every shadow outside the window looked like someone waiting to record me. On the 3rd day, a letter arrived from the landlord. He had received complaints about unwanted attention and asked if I could resolve the matter quickly. I felt the air leave my lungs. One woman's lie was now threatening my home, my peace, my name. I called David again. He didn't answer. I left another message, calmer this time. "David, please, I'm not angry anymore, but this has gone too far." No reply. I spent the night cleaning, scrubbing the kitchen counters, even though they were spotless. I needed control over something, anything. When you're under attack, even order feels like survival. Then, something unexpected happened. A young journalist, a local reporter named Emma, sent me a message. Her tone was respectful, not intrusive. She said she had been following the story and wasn't convinced by Lydia's version. "I'd like to talk," she wrote. "Off the record first. I believe there's more to this." I hesitated. I had learned to distrust anyone holding a camera or microphone, but something about her message felt sincere. The next day, she came to my apartment. She was young, maybe late 20s, dressed plainly, notebook in hand. "I don't think you stole anything," she said right away. "The timelines don't add up, and there's no police report from Lydia backing her claims." Her words were like a breath of air after weeks underwater. We sat down at the table, and I told her everything, from the moment I moved out after the lottery, to the day Lydia returned begging for shelter, to the phone call I overheard. Emma listened quietly, taking notes. When I mentioned that I had recorded parts of that conversation, her promising to get the old woman's savings, Emma's eyes lit up. "Do you still have the recording?" she asked. I nodded and handed her my phone. She played the clip several times, listening carefully. Lydia's voice was unmistakable, manipulative, cold. "This changes everything," Emma said. Within 48 hours, she had done what no one else had bothered to do, real journalism. She traced Lydia's activities after the lottery win, found financial records, and even confirmed through court filings that Lydia's accounts were under investigation for fraud and misappropriation. Her article went live the next morning. The headline was simple but sharp. "New evidence reveals lies behind lottery scandal. Mother-in-law was victim, not thief." I woke up to silence that morning, not the hostile kind, but the heavy calm that follows a storm. My phone was still buzzing, but the tone of the messages had changed. "Mom, we're sorry for believing those rumors. People owe you an apology. Justice always wins." The comments sections began turning in my favor. Screenshots of Lydia's lies were dissected by online users who had once mocked me. The same media that had attacked me now rushed to set the record straight. Then came the audio leak. Someone, likely from the investigation, had leaked the recording of Lydia's phone call, the same one where she bragged about manipulating me for money. It spread like wildfire. News channels replayed it. Social media users dissected every word. "She still has something," Lydia's voice echoed again and again. "I'll get it." People finally saw who she was, a woman who destroyed her own family for greed. For a while, I didn't know how to feel. Vindicated, yes, but also exhausted. The damage was done. My name was cleared, but the peace I had before the scandal would never fully return. David called that evening. His voice was quiet, filled with shame. "Mum, I saw the article. I'm so sorry." I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of distance and hurt. "She's gone," he continued. "They say she left the city. The investigation is reopening. I don't know what to do anymore." I spoke softly. "You need to find yourself again, David. Money made her blind, but you followed her willingly. Don't pretend you didn't." He didn't argue. "You're right," he said. "I did. And I lost everything that mattered." After the call, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The same lights that once blinded them now seemed so far away. A few days later, a courier came to my door. He handed me an envelope. No sender name, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Lydia's. It was neat, deliberate, familiar. I stood there for a long time, turning the envelope in my hands. My instinct was to tear it apart, throw it away, burn every reminder of her existence. But curiosity, that old human weakness, held me still. I placed it on the table and stared at it. Was it an apology? Another lie? A plea for sympathy? The air felt heavy again, like the moment before a storm. The truth had finally set me free, but her voice, even written, still had the power to pull me back into the shadows. I traced my finger over the name written on the front. To Mother. It was the first time she had called me that in years. I took a deep breath. Then I reached for a knife to open the seal. Then, one evening, I received a letter from Lydia herself. The envelope sat on my table for hours before I touched it again. The handwriting was unmistakable, Lydia's. Careful, graceful, and deliberate, as if even her guilt had to look composed. I thought of all the times I had written her letters over the years. Birthday cards, holiday notes, handwritten prayers slipped into her purse when she was pregnant. All those words of warmth, now echoed back to me in an envelope that smelled faintly of perfume and regret. When I finally opened it, I was surprised by how short it was. No theatrics, no excuses written in gold ink or tear-stained paper. Just a few lines on plain stationery, the edges slightly crumpled. Her handwriting shook in some places, steady in others, the pattern of someone trying to hold themselves together. She began simply, "Mother, I don't know where to start. Maybe I don't deserve to." I read that line twice. The word mother caught me off guard. She hadn't called me that in years. For a moment, I forgot the noise, the betrayal, the public shame. For a brief second, I saw the young woman who once came into my home with bright eyes, holding my son's hand and calling me Mom with genuine warmth. Then the words that followed brought me back to reality. She wrote about how everything had spiraled after the lottery, how the money made her restless, paranoid, hungry for control. Every new thing we bought made the old parts of me disappear, she said. I stopped recognizing myself, but I couldn't stop spending. I thought the world would only respect me if I looked untouchable. There was no denying it. Lydia had always wanted to be admired. Even before the money, she was obsessed with appearances. Her house had to be spotless, her clothes expensive, her smiles rehearsed. I used to think it was insecurity. Now I saw it was deeper than that. It was emptiness. One line struck me harder than the rest. I thought winning meant I'd never need anyone again, but I've never felt so alone. I stopped reading for a while. My hands trembled slightly. Those words, stripped of arrogance, sounded like a confession and a sentence all at once. She wrote about David too. Said she hadn't spoken to him since the investigation reopened. That she missed him, but she knew he hated her now. He blames me for everything, she said. And maybe he should. I thought of my son then, the boy who once used to bring me flowers from the garden, who used to say he'd build me a bigger house one day. I wondered what kind of man he had become living under her influence. Weak, maybe. Lost, definitely. The letter continued. I know I ruined everything. I know you'll never trust me again, but I needed you to know I'm sorry, not because I got caught, but because I finally saw what I destroyed. I destroyed the only people who ever truly cared about me. I put the paper down and closed my eyes. There was a time I prayed for those words. I wanted an apology, more than money, more than justice. But now, holding it in my hands, it didn't feel like healing. It felt like history, something already written, unchangeable. Still, I read until the end. Her final lines were brief, almost rushed, as if she feared she'd lose the courage to write them. I'm leaving town soon. I don't know where I'll go. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to have my words. They're all I have left. She signed it, Lydia. No closing remark. No plea for contact. Just a quiet ending. I folded the letter carefully, as if it might fall apart in my hands. For a long time, I sat there in silence, staring at the table where it lay. I didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever in the way she wanted. Forgiveness, I had learned, isn't always about the other person. Sometimes it's about protecting your own peace. I placed the letter in a drawer, not to treasure it, but to contain it. Some memories don't need to be displayed. They just need to rest somewhere, out of sight, so they stop bleeding into every part of your life. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, not because the past was resolved, but because I finally accepted it couldn't be undone. Still, her words lingered, especially that line about loneliness. I thought winning meant I'd never need anyone again, but I've never felt so alone. It haunted me because it was true, not just for her, but for so many people. I had seen how money changes hearts, how success, without humility, corrodes the soul. The following days were quiet. The reporters stopped calling. The online noise faded. People found new scandals to obsess over. I went back to my small routines, morning tea, light cleaning, volunteering at the shelter on weekends. Life, stripped of its noise, began to feel steady again. Then, 1 month later, another letter came. This time, handwritten in the same style, but with a return address. It was from Lydia again. The handwriting was neater this time. There was calm in her strokes, like she had finally accepted her fate. She began with gratitude. Thank you for not throwing away my first letter. I didn't expect a reply, but knowing you read it gave me some peace. She said she had been attending counseling sessions mandated by the court as part of her rehabilitation program. She had sold her jewelry, paid back part of what she owed, and was working at a local women's shelter, the same kind of place I volunteered at. I meet women every day who remind me of who I became. She wrote, broken by greed, pride, and fear. Helping them is my punishment, but also my healing. Then she asked for something unexpected. I'd like to meet you once, not to ask for forgiveness, but to apologize properly. I know I don't deserve even that chance, but I need to face what I've done. I read that paragraph again and again. There it was, the request that forced me to look inward. Would meeting her reopen the wound I had worked so hard to close, or would it finally put it to rest? For days I couldn't decide. I kept the letter on my nightstand, reading it in fragments. Sometimes I felt pity, other times anger. Each time I folded it away, my chest tightened a little less. One afternoon, while at the shelter, a woman shared her story about forgiving her abuser, not because he deserved it, but because she didn't want his shadow to live rent-free in her mind anymore. That night, I thought about Lydia again, about how hate is a heavy thing to carry. I made tea and sat by the window, staring at the streetlights. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't come often, not absence of noise, but the presence of peace. I realized something then. Lydia didn't need my forgiveness as much as I needed to let go of my resentment. Not for her, for me. The next morning, I wrote back. A short note. Lydia, I will meet you once. Not to fix the past, but to acknowledge it. Some bridges aren't rebuilt, but they can stop burning. I didn't know what I would say when we met, or how I would feel. But I knew this. Closure isn't about the other person's apology. It's about your decision to stop living inside the wound. And maybe that was what peace truly meant. A month later, she asked to meet, and I had to decide if peace was worth reopening the wound. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions. The rain tapped gently against the window, soft but steady. She sat before me, hands wrapped around a half-empty cup. Her eyes were tired, her confidence was gone. I ruined everything, she said. Her voice cracked. I hurt you, and I hurt David. I didn't answer right away. I watched her, the same woman who once smirked as I packed my bags. Now, she couldn't even hold my gaze. You did, I said finally. But life has already punished you in ways I never could. Tears slid down her cheeks. I lost everything. But losing your respect, that's what broke me. Silence filled the space between us, the kind that forces you to face yourself. Can you ever forgive me? She asked quietly. I leaned forward. Forgiveness isn't about you, I said. It's about freeing myself from what you did. She nodded slowly, almost in relief. Maybe she knew this was as close to mercy as she would ever get. When I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. I paid for the coffee, walked into the rain, and felt something shift inside me. Not peace, but release. That night, David called with unexpected news that closed the chapter for good. David called one evening. His voice was calm this time, stripped of pride and excuses. Mum, he said, I'm leaving Lydia. She needs to rebuild her life alone, and I need to rebuild mine. There was a long pause before he added, I'm sorry for everything. I closed my eyes. For years I had waited to hear those words. I still love you, David, I said. But trust takes time. We'll start there. Months passed. I moved into a smaller home on the edge of town. The rooms were quiet, but they felt like mine. I tended a little garden in the back. The flowers took time to grow, like healing. Each morning I watered them and reminded myself that peace isn't bought, it's earned. Lydia eventually left the city. No one knew where she went. Some said she remarried, others said she vanished. I never asked. I wished her healing, but I never forgot. People sometimes ask if I regret opening my door that night, the night she came begging for help. I don't. Because forgiveness isn't surrender, it's strength. And I learned something about money. It magnifies what's already inside you. For some, greed. For others, grace. My daughter-in-law won $95 million and lost everything that mattered, while I, left with nothing, found peace money could never buy. If you believe dignity and truth always outlast greed, like and subscribe for more real stories of strength, justice, and redemption.